I'd like to introduce myself. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Deb Windsor. I'm Practice Support Manager at the division. I should start by saying I'm not a nurse, but I do manage a practice as part of my role, and I do have quite a lot to do with nurses. In Australia, we've got 80% of the population will visit a general practice annually. So that's a high proportion of the population walking through the doors of general practice. So already that gives you a sense of how busy it is. It is the most frequent point of entry into the health system. So yes, there's big demand on our hospitals. Yes, there's big demand on our community health centres, but general practice is really the hub of where a lot of healthcare happens. And I think it's relevant at this point just to point out that pretty much every general practice is different. There is a range of business arrangements, so we might have solo GP, we might have some working in partnership, we might have corporate general practice centres, and they change depending on both the business structure, the personalities involved, and the type of care that they're wanting to provide. The general practice team has changed significantly, particularly over the past few years. Nurses have worked in general practice for some time, but particularly over the last 7 to 10 years, I guess, that role has changed significantly. Other members of the team have changed as well. Now, more and more, you're likely to find allied health workers operating out of the general practice setting, so psychologists, dietitians, diabetes educators. So it is much more of a team environment than the old style of just going in to see the doctor. You're more likely as a patient to come across any number of health professionals when you walk into the general practice setting. But we're here to talk about practice nursing, so certainly practice nurses are vital members of the general practice team today. It's quite an exciting role, and for those of you that are currently working in it, I'm sure you will agree that it's busy and ever-changing, it's very dynamic. But the practice nurse definitely provides a lot of support to GPs these days and can take on a lot of the work, which in turn allows the doctor to see more patients. And particularly in rural areas where we have a chronic shortage of GPs, the role is more and more important because it allows access for other people to see the doctor. As chronic disease grows within our community, there's a heavier burden on general practice to manage chronic disease, and the role of the practice nurse is very important in managing chronic disease. One, because of the time required to educate patients who are suffering from a chronic disease. Two, from a practical sense, nurses are cheaper to run than GPs, and so they can be afforded to spend the time with patients. Often is the case, patients will open up to a nurse. The whole role is dependent upon nurses being competent and confident to perform the activities that are required. Just like every practice is different, every practice nurse is different and unique. So I guess the role, depending on skills and experience, can be quite different, but generally it would involve some triage, assessment of patients, obviously care and treatment of patients, diagnostic services like ECG, spirometry, INR, data management. The data is really useful, not only on an individual patient basis, what's kept in the software, but also on a practice population basis. And I hope when every one of you are working in the general practice setting that we can talk about data management in more detail. And often the practice nurse works as an advocate for the patient. What do you need? Some fairly basic things. You need to be registered as either a registered nurse or an enrolled nurse. You need to have an understanding of the national competency standards, which we will be going over a bit later. You need to be involved in continuing professional development because things change. It is a dynamic environment. You do need to be self-directed, but also able to work as part of a team because generally it is a small team environment. You need to have excellent communication and interpersonal skills. organisational skills, obviously, and more often, computing skills is the reality. And certainly if you can put some time into the computing skills, it will make your job easier in the long run. General practice is small business.